ceremony at the Perdana Putra complex. Shahbaz was received by Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim, followed by the playing of the national anthems of both countries. He then inspected a guard of honour mounted by 3 officers and 103 personnel from the 1st Battalion of the Royal Malay Regiment. After the ceremony, Shahbaz signed the guest book and then proceeded to a bilateral meeting with Datuk Sri Anwar. Both leaders are expected to review Malaysia-Pakistan bilateral ties and explore new areas of collaboration, particularly in trade and investment, the halal industry, education, tourism and defence. Shahbaz's visit to Malaysia was at the invitation of the Prime Minister and serves as a reciprocal gesture to Datuk Sri Anwar's official visit to Pakistan in October last year, reflecting the deepening ties between the two nations. The government will hold a special gathering to celebrate the return of all 23 Malaysian heroes and heroines who took part in the global Sumud Flotilla humanitarian mission. Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim said the event would also serve to strengthen the solidarity of Malaysians with the people of Palestine.
Terima kasih kepada semua yang participate dalam semua flotilla itu sebab ini menimbulkan satu kesedaran, kejutan kepada rakyat, terutama yang tak ikuti. Ya. Ada kebahagiaan kat sini semua yang terima kasih. Jumpa di KL insya-Allah. Saya adjust time malam kita buat perhimpunan sikit nah.
In the conversation with the Malaysian delegation, Datuk Sri Anwar also expressed appreciation for their courage, perseverance and sacrifice in defending the people of Gaza who continue to suffer oppression. All 23 Malaysian activists participating in the mission were detained by Israeli forces after their vessels were intercepted in the R3 red zone of the Mediterranean Sea. They were taken to the port of Ashdod, Israel, and were later released and departed from Ramon Airport before arriving in Istanbul about 2 hours later. Hamas has called for a swift start to a hostage prisoner exchange with Israel as negotiators from both sides headed to Egypt for crucial talks aimed at ending the nearly 2-year war in Gaza. Foreign ministers from several countries, including Egypt, said the talks are a real opportunity to achieve a sustainable ceasefire. Hamas said its delegation will begin negotiations on mechanisms for a ceasefire, the withdrawal of occupation forces and a prisoner exchange. A senior Hamas official said the group is very keen to reach an agreement to end the war and immediately begin the prisoner exchange process in accordance with the field conditions. The diplomatic push follows Hamas' positive response to US President Donald Trump's roadmap for an end to the fighting and the release of captives in Gaza in exchange for Palestinians held in Israeli jails. Ahead of the discussions in Egypt, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio urged Israel to stop bombing Gaza. He noted that Israel must stop its attacks as it would be difficult to release hostages in the middle of strikes. During communications with mediators, Hamas insisted that it is essential for Israel to halt military operations across all areas of the Gaza Strip, cease all air reconnaissance and drone activities, and withdraw from inside Gaza City. Russia launched drones, missiles and guided aerial bombs across Ukraine on Sunday, killing at least 5 people in a major nighttime attack that Ukrainian officials said targeted civilian infrastructure. According to Ukraine's Air Force, Moscow fired 53 ballistic and cruise missiles and 496 drones. President Volodymyr Zelensky reported that 9 regions were targeted. 4 people, including a 15-year-old, died in a combined drone and missile strike on Lviv. It was the largest aerial assault on the historic western city and surrounding region since Russia's full-scale invasion on the 24th of February 2022. Early in the war, Lviv was seen as a haven from the fighting and destruction farther east. According to a statement by Ukraine's police force, at least 6 more people were injured. The strike left 2 districts of Lviv without power and disrupted public transportation for a few hours early on Sunday. Mayor Andrew Sadovyi reported that a business complex on Lviv's outskirts caught fire following the strike, describing it as a civilian facility unlinked to Ukraine's war effort. Local committees in Syria cast their ballots for members of a transitional parliament. A third of the new lawmakers will be appointed directly by interim leader Ahmed al-Sharaa. Members of the local committees queued up to vote at Syria's National Library, formerly the Assad National Library. Around 6,000 people took part in the selection process. According to the Electoral Commission, more than 1,500 candidates are running for the assembly, which will have a renewable 30-month mandate. Sharaa is to appoint 70 representatives to the 210-member body. The other two-thirds are being selected by local committees appointed by the Electoral Commission, which itself was appointed by Sharaa. However, southern Syria's Druze majority Sueda province, which suffered sectarian bloodshed in July, and the country's Kurdish-held northeast are excluded from the process for now. This is because they are outside Damascus control and their 32 seats will remain empty. The new authorities dissolved Syria's rubber stamp legislature after taking power. Under a temporary constitution announced in March, the incoming parliament will exercise legislative functions until a permanent constitution is adopted and new elections are held. French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu on Sunday named Roland Lescure, a close ally of French President Emmanuel Macron, as finance minister in a new cabinet that saw several senior ministers in the last ousted government retain their posts. Lescure, who was swift to rally behind Macron when he first ran for the presidency in 2017, briefly spent time inside the Socialist Party early in his career. His nomination was widely seen as a gesture to the left ahead of further delicate cross-party budget negotiations. Budget talks have grown increasingly fraught, requiring delicate trade-offs between 3 ideologically opposed blocs: Macron's ruling centrist minority, the far right, and the left. Lecornu's 2 predecessors, François Bayrou and Michel Barnier, were brought down by Parliament over efforts to rein in France's public spending at a time when rating agencies and investors are closely watching the country's deficit, the largest in the Eurozone. Former Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire, who oversaw France's whatever-it-cost response to the COVID pandemic, was appointed Defence Minister. He will now shape French thinking on how Europe should bolster European security as US President Donald Trump demands the European Union do more to support Ukraine. President Donald Trump claimed that strikes on small vessels near the Venezuelan coast that U.S. officials accuse of carrying drugs have been so successful that there are no boats left in that area of the Caribbean.
We're so good at it that there are no boats. In fact, even fishing boats, nobody wants to go into the water anymore. Sorry to tell you that. But we're stopping drugs coming into America, if that's okay. We're stopping drugs at a level that nobody's ever seen before.
According to U.S. officials, at least 21 people have been killed in the strikes so far. The White House said the strikes, which have blown up at least 4 boats so far, are stopping drugs from reaching the U.S. However, Democrats and many legal experts question the legality of using lethal force in foreign or international waters against suspects who have not been intercepted or questioned. Trump boasted that his policy was working and that military action could be expanded to land routes. Meanwhile, Donald Trump administration has branded Chicago a war zone as a justification for deploying soldiers against the will of local Democratic officials. An escalating political crisis across the country pits Trump's anti-crime and migration crackdown against opposition Democrats who accuse him of a power grab. Trump late Saturday authorized deployment of 300 National Guard soldiers to Chicago, the third largest city in the U.S. This is despite the opposition of elected leaders, including the mayor and state governor J.B. Pritzker. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem defended the move, claiming that Chicago is a war zone. However, Pritzker accused the Republicans of aiming to sow mayhem on the ground. He said they want to create the war zone so that they can send in even more troops. Trump, who previously spoke of using the military for a war from within, shows no signs of backing off his hardline campaign. He claimed that Portland is also burning to the ground with insurrections all over the place. Key ally Mike Johnson, the Republican Speaker of the House of Representatives, echoed the president's rhetoric. He said the National Guard troops deployed to the U.S. capital, Washington, had responded to a literal war zone. Protesters both for and against Ecuador's President Daniel Noboa rallied in the capital Quito on Sunday after a state of emergency took effect in 10 provinces. Anti-government demonstrations began 2 weeks ago, organized by the country's largest indigenous group, in response to the removal of a fuel subsidy that raised diesel prices. Police reported no injuries or arrests on Sunday, but officers dispersed protesters using tear gas after some of them tried to break through the security cordon protecting the park. Late Saturday, the government declared a state of emergency starting Sunday at midnight in 10 provinces, citing serious internal unrest. The provinces are areas with large indigenous populations where protests have been concentrated. The order restricts freedom of assembly but does not prohibit peaceful demonstrations. The Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador said in a statement that Noboa's emergency decree deepens his war policy against the population's legitimate demands and calls on international human rights organizations to remain vigilant. Georgia's Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze has vowed opposition arrests after police used force against protesters who tried to enter the presidential palace. He called the unrest a coup bid during a controversial election. Without giving details, Kobakidze said several people have already been arrested, including the organizers of the attempted overthrow. He added many more must expect sentences for the violence they carried out against the state and law enforcement. The Central Election Commission said Georgian Dream had secured municipal council majorities in every municipality. It said the party's candidates also scored landslide wins in mayoral races in all cities. However, most opposition parties had boycotted the vote. On Saturday, tens of thousands of anti-government demonstrators flooded Tbilisi's Freedom Square after the opposition urged a last-chance election day protest to save democracy. A group of protesters later tried to enter the presidential palace, prompting riot police to use tear gas and water cannons. Coming up, gunman opens fire on Sydney Street, injuring 16. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum expressed confidence that her government will reach a favorable agreement with the U.S. and other nations regarding trade. She added the country in parallel will present developments in a plan to boost local tech. Sheinbaum said her government would be in the coming weeks present advances to Made in Mexico projects developing electrical vehicles, semiconductors, satellites and drones. She said this is part of a plan that is aligned with the changing trade environment.
Estaremos presentando el prototipo del vehículo eléctrico línea, los avances del taller de diseño de semiconductores y también los proyectos de satélites nacionales y de un vehículo aéreo no tripulado producido 100% en México. Esto es parte de un proyecto ambicioso que presentaremos en las próximas semanas, que le llamamos México, País de Innovación, que incluye el desarrollo del Laboratorio Nacional de Inteligencia Artificial.
Elected last year, the former Mexico City mayor has spent much of a term navigating a complex relationship with the U.S., Mexico's top trade partner. Latin America's #2 economy has been largely spared the brunt of Donald Trump's tariffs thanks to a free trade agreement with the U.S. and Canada that is up for review next year. Iran's parliament has approved a plan to remove 4 zeros from the national currency, the rial, which has sharply depreciated as the country grapples with renewed sanctions. Lawmakers passed the bill 2 months after a parliamentary commission revived the long-stalled proposal aimed at simplifying transactions. Under the plan, 10,000 current rials will be replaced by 1 new rial. Both versions will circulate for up to 3 years, with the central bank given 2 years to launch the transition. Head of Parliament's Economic Commission, Samsudin Hussain, said the move will make the rial easier to use in transactions and calculations. He added high inflation had severely diminished the usefulness of banknotes. The redenomination was first floated in 2019, but later shelved. It still requires approval by the Guardian Council and the signature of President Masoud Pezeshkian to take effect. According to black market trackers, the rial has hit repeated record lows in recent days amid the re-imposition of United Nations sanctions on Iran. Britain, France and Germany last month triggered the snapback mechanism to restore international sanctions over Iran's alleged non-compliance with the nuclear deal. A man is in custody after allegedly shooting up to 50 bullets into a busy Sydney street, wounding 16 people. Police have so far not ruled out links to terrorism or gang activity. Police were called to a street in the city's inner west where the alleged gunman was firing at random at passing cars and police. New South Wales Police Acting Superintendent Stephen Parry said around 50 shots were fired. A large contingent of police swarmed the area and locked down the street before entering a unit above a business and arresting the man. They also seized a rifle from the scene. The accused, 60-year-old shooter, was taken to hospital and treated for wounds sustained during his arrest. Police said one man self-presented to hospital with a gunshot wound following the incident, but would likely survive. The remaining people were treated by ambulance staff for minor injuries, including shattered glass as bullets hit their car windows. A police investigation into the case is ongoing. British police are investigating a suspected arson at a mosque in southern England as hate crime, days after a fatal attack on a synagogue. Officers were called to the incident at the mosque in the southern coast town of Peacehaven late on Saturday. While no one was injured, the blaze caused damage to the mosque's front entrance and a vehicle parked outside. In the wake of the attack, Sussex police shared images of 2 masked men dressed in dark clothing and appealed for help from the public to identify them. Detective Inspector Gavin Patch branded the fire an appalling and reckless attack which will leave many people feeling less safe. He added the police are treating it as an arson with intent to endanger life and are continuing to pursue a number of lines of inquiry to identify those responsible. responsible. Interior Minister Shabana Mahmood called the attack deeply concerning. She stressed that attacks against Britain's Muslims are attacks against all Britons and the country itself. The fire follows an attack last Thursday on a synagogue in the northern city of Manchester, in which 2 people died and 3 others were seriously injured. Now, landslides and floods triggered by heavy downpours in Nepal and neighbouring India have killed more than 60 people, officials said on Sunday, as rescue workers race to reach cut-off communities in the remote mountainous terrain. Torrential downpours have lashed Nepal since Friday, leaving rivers in Spate and many areas in the Himalayan nation inundated. At least 44 people have died in rain-triggered disasters and 5 are missing. As many as 37 were killed by landslides in the worst affected eastern district of Ilam. Rivers in the capital, Kathmandu, have also swelled, inundating settlements along their banks. Security personnel were deployed to assist rescue efforts with helicopters and motorboats. Landslides have blocked several highways and disrupted flights, leaving hundreds of travellers, many returning after celebrating the Hindu festival of Dashain, stranded. Nepal Prime Minister Shushkila Karki said government agencies were fully prepared for rescue and relief. She also said in an address that the government has declared Sunday and Monday public holidays and urged people not to travel unless necessary. Up next, Russell wins Singapore GP as McLaren seal constructors title. Rookie Fermin Aldeker of Spain earned the first victory of his fledgling MotoGP career at the Indonesia Grand Prix on Sunday, while newly crowned champion compatriot Marc Marquez crashed out after a crunching collision with Italian Marco Bezzecchi. Pole-sitter Bezzecchi had an awful start to the race, finding himself in 6th place after the first 2 turns, and the Aprilia rider was a touch too forceful in his desperation to climb back into the lead. As he charged back into the fray, Bezzecchi nudged the rear of Marquez Ducati, and the pair hurtled into the gravel at high speed, with Marquez appearing to be in significant discomfort after the fall. Ducati's afternoon then went from bad to worse a few laps later when 2-time champion Francesco Bagnaglia's bike slipped out from underneath him and dumped him onto the asphalt. Marquez's crash continued a dreadful streak of luck for him at the Mandalika International Circuit, where he has never been able to finish a Grand Prix in 4 attempts. His team confirmed that Marquez suffered a collarbone injury as a result of the collision. The win helped Adeguar erase the pain of his second-place finish in Saturday's sprint, where he led for most of the 13-lap race before finishing second behind Bezzecchi. KTM's Pedro Acosta finished second, with Aldeguer's Spanish teammate Alex Marquez completing the podium. Mercedes' George Russell won the Singapore Grand Prix last night ahead of Max Verstappen and Lando Norris as McLaren clinched the Formula One Constructors' Championship. Oscar Piastri was 4th, which meant his lead over his McLaren teammate Norris in the driver's standings was cut to 22 points. The 27 points scored by Piastri and Norris were more than enough for McLaren to equal the record set by Red Bull in 2023 by winning the team title with 6 races to spare. It was McLaren's second title in a row and the 10th in the team's history. Kimi Antonelli crossed the line 5th in a Mercedes, followed by the Ferraris of Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. Fernando Alonso, Olivier Berman and Carlos Sainz rounded out the top 10. The night race in Singapore was declared the first official Formula One heat hazard. And that means all drivers had to have liquid-cooled vests available, though wearing them was not mandatory. However, with the air temperature around 28 degrees Celsius for the night race rather than the expected 31 degrees Celsius, some opted not to use the new equipment, including Verstappen. Novak Djokovic survived a night of danger and discomfort on Sunday at the Rolex Shanghai Masters, battling through illness and inspired opposition to outlast German qualifier Yannick Hanfmann 4-6, 7-5, 6-3. The record four-time champion was outplayed for much of his third-round clash with Hanfmann, but he dug deep late on, drawing energy from the crowd to keep his title pursuit alive. After falling victim to Hanfmann's variety and booming serve in the first set, where the German fired 4 consecutive aces, Djokovic faced additional challenges in the second set. The 38-year-old appeared to vomit during a changeover and began shortening the points in an effort to regain control. Hanfmann, the number 150 player in the PIF ATP rankings, was aiming to become the lowest-ranked player to defeat Djokovic at ATP Masters 1000 level. Despite his aggressive shot-making, which resulted in 33 winners, including 13 aces, he couldn't hold off Djokovic once he found his rhythm. With his 2-hour, 45-minute victory, his second-longest best-of-3 set match in 2025, Djokovic set a fourth-round meeting with Spain's Joan Munar. Meanwhile, Jannik Sinner bid to retain his Shanghai Masters title ended in agonizing fashion on Sunday when the world number 2 was forced to retire mid-match against Talon Griekspoor due to debilitating cramps in humid condition. Griekspoor was leading the third-round clash at 6-7, 7-5, 3-2 when Sinner suffered cramps in his thigh, forcing him to retire after more than 2.5 hours on court. Sinner had begun to struggle in the second set, leading him to frantically apply an ice towel around his neck at changeovers. The defending champion was visibly limping and massaging his thigh in the decider and in the sixth game. He limped back to his chair with the help of physio before he was forced to make the call to retire. Amanda Anisimova beat Linda Noskova 6-love 2-6, 6-2 on Sunday to win the China Open for her second title of a breakthrough year and fourth overall. The third-seeded American survived a second set wobble to overpower the Czech 26th seed in 1 hour 46 minutes in Beijing. Anisimova began ruthlessly winning the first set in 23 minutes without dropping a game. A defiant Noskova, contesting her first WTA 1000 final, found her feet in the second set, breaking early and powering to a 5-2 lead before closing out. The two went toe-to-toe in the decider until Anisimova broke for a 4-2 lead, digging deep to reach the finish line with a winner on the first match point. It's been a stellar season for Anisimova, the world number 4, who was also runner-up at Wimbledon. The last year, she was at world number 43. Anisimova, who will play at the season-ending WTA finals for the first time, extended her gratitude to her coaches. Anisimova dumped out second seed Gauff in the Beijing semi-finals, thrashing the two-time Grand Slam winner 6-1, 6-2 in 58 minutes. The match was only the second WTA 1000 final in which both players were born during the 2000s. And that concludes today's edition of World Today. In our top story, Malaysia and Pakistan exploring new areas of collaboration. Till then, I'm Mohanapriya, Malaysia Madani, Rakyat, Disantuni. Thank you for your company.